O ka timatake rā tā tātou kōrero mo te pō. Timata ki te karakia, no reira. Ka timatake rā ki tētei karakia ko karakia tia e tātou i ngā marama ko i pātu. No reira, kei ta waka wini ngā tai o te pō, kei ta waka wana ngā tai o te o marama, kei ta waka rurutu ngā tai o pūpuke te iri, pūpuke te marama, pūpuke te wānanga o te pō o ngā timutunga. No reira, tēnei ka mi atu rā kia koutou, ko uru mai ki roto i tēnei wānanga, kia rongo anō rā e pāna ki ngā kōrero o te karakia mo te kaupeka mo te marama nei. Ka peka atu rā te wakaaro ki ngā tini aitua, ko pē i nei ki runga i a tātou i tēnei wā, uri noa i te manga, uri noa i te motu. Ko rātou te unga mate ki rātou, ko tātou te unga ora ki tātou. No reira, tēnei ka mi i anō rā kia tātou e takatu nei he. So welcome everyone to our karakia for tonight. We've gone through a couple of months now, and those who have been following it would have seen that we post our karakia Wānanga up on our YouTube channel each month, just for those who want to revisit it or those who aren't able to attend these particular sessions. Today's one will be focused on our September month, of course, and that's a real nice one. Now that we're just talking about one karakia, it's probably going to be possibly a 20-30 minute session. E kōrero āpiti au, Jane?
Ka hore, atu I te mihi kia tātou, no reira pai te kite I a tātou e te wānau. It's just lovely to see everyone, and we had a lovely weekend. I pai tō mātou hui I te marae, I te rāhoroi me te rātapu, mo te wānanga, whai kōrero, me ngā mahi kapahaka o tō tātou rōpū o te uru o te rangi. So just we had a wonderful weekend at the pā. Good day for Wānanga, rain and wind, so it was good to be indoors, and then we had the sunshine for us on Sunday when we went and planted some pohutukawa at Pohokura. So it's just lovely to have our tamariki and our whānau getting ready for Taranaki Tūmai. So kia koe, Mitch.
So that's probably a good plug actually for Taranaki Tūmai. So we've got that kaupapa coming up upon us really quickly. I know that the registrations have closed, but hopefully those that are able to make it do come up and participate in Taranaki Tūmai, 2nd and the 3rd from memory. So that's being hosted this year by Ngā Ruaine. Tika? Oh, by Ngāti Ruanui. So a big part of that will take place in Te Awara. So us as a whānau, as a iwi, will be located at Waiokura, and those who are participating in Taranaki Tūmai are more than welcome to come to Waiokura and spend that weekend with us. In addition to that, we'll have some of our whānau from down Ngāti Tamaki Te Tauiu, so they're doing a little bit of a trip up this way, and we'll be dropping into Pukearua and into Urenui as well, and then we'll come and join us at Waiokura for Taranaki Tūmai. So we're shaping up to be a fantastic couple of days of whanaungatanga, of kotaitanga, and manakitanga as well. So it'd be great to see some of you if you are able to make it. If you haven't registered, that's okay. You're more than welcome to still come up and just participate in the weekend and in the event that happen, even as a spectator. It's been going for quite some time now, Taranaki Tūmai. So if you haven't had the opportunity to be a part of that this year, would be a good opportunity for that. So just before we launch into the karakia, as I mentioned before, we've probably run about 6, 7 of these wānanga, and each wānanga has been focused on the particular karakia for each of the months that are part of our calendar for this year. This particular karakia, you'll notice some references to other karakia that have been in the calendar. And that's intentional, because through the compilation or collation of all of these karakia that was sort of selected and chosen as short little karakia, short little pieces that are easy to learn, but that there is some repetition in them to be able to reinforce that learning when we talk about these particular karakia and the kōrero and content within them. Just in the background there, just want to mention there's a lovely pā site just down the bottom there. Arapawa Nui is just part of it. It continues to extend to the left of that. And a beautiful shot there of one of our awa mimi tangiato o te wai o Me'iro. So in terms of this month's karakia, we can see that there's a key framework there, and it's all based around this kupu hiringa. In some of the other karakia, as I mentioned, we've seen pūpuke te hihiri, the karakia that I used earlier, and when we've talked about that particular karakia, we see a progression of thought. There's a lot of similarities within this one, in that we do see a progression. We do see that concept of duality that we'll talk about in other kōrero, in other wānanga. And in terms of hiringa, when we've discussed this term hiringa and other karakia, we've used translations like energy, being energetic, being dynamic. And throughout this karakia, we see that word. So if we consider that as a focus of energy, as a focus of dynamism, being dynamic, and then we consider the words after it. So talking about duality, we have nuku and rangi. When we see nuku and rangi together, we tend to reference papatua nuku, of course, and rangi nui, so below and above. When we also talk about nuku and rangi, you can reference it to yourself as an individual. So everything from your shoulders down could be considered nuku, and that's all about the labour, being industrious, having the ability to do the things, do the work that needs to be done. And when we consider rangi from the shoulders up, it's more about the intelligence and the intuitiveness, the insightfulness needed in order to carry out the work that's ahead of you. Kōrero āpiti au, Jake?
No, tino pai te rā. So yeah, and I guess whānau, one of the themes, so as Mitch has touched on that whole duality, so you often see nuku and rangi, and so we know about the narrative around papatua nuku and rangi nui, but then also the piece that Mitch has said about the consciousness around the rangi piece, and then the actual act of doing. And so we often refer to, when we see nuku in a lot of our karakia, it talks about some of those tangible aspects, or what we call the physical aspects, and then the references to hiringa rangi being the sort of metaphysical or intangible aspects. So that's always a really good sort of way of, when we see karakia, and when we see the reference of nuku and rangi, which you often see together in karakia, it talks about the fact that we look at things holistically, or in another sense, te taha kiko, te taha wairua. So those physical elements, or those spiritual elements, or, the things that you can't necessarily physically touch, but you sense and feel, those aspects of hiringa rangi and hiringa nuku, very much the physical, the things that we can touch, feel. So that's, that's for me, when I've always sort of looked at karakia, that's the sort of formula, if you like, which is really useful to think about.
So if we consider just those first two lines, ko hiringa nuku, ko hiringa rangi, within that we could see the energy of the tangible, the energy of the scene, the energy of te ao kiko, the energy of being industrious and productive, and ko hiringa rangi, the energy and the dynamism around those things that are intangible to us, those things that are unseen, those things of te ao wairua, those things around the intelligence, the energy and the dynamism around intelligence, around intuitiveness, around insightfulness. The next two lines again, you at times do see kōrero and wānanga together, but this one, if we consider ko hiringa te kōrero in relation to discussion, conversation, and exchange. And wānanga, when we consider wānanga, we often refer it to, we hear wānanga as a place where you could go to, we hear wānanga as a forum where we can go into to learn, but wānanga, you can wānanga by yourself, and it's really just the ability to contemplate things, to seek an understanding, to be able to consider and deliberate, to be able to reflect on things as well. This is all wānanga within yourself, but also wānanga in terms of knowledge systems and ways of learning and ways of understanding. So in consideration of those lines, the energy and the dynamism around the discussion, around the exchange of dialogue, of conversation, the energy around the ways of seeking common understanding around or knowledge systems, the energy or dynamism around the ability to deliberate, to reflect on what's currently happening or what's currently in front of you. So again, hiringa nuku, the energy around the tangible, hiringa rangi, energy around the intangible, ko hiringa te kōrero, the energy or dynamism around creating dialogue, having conversation, having exchange, ko hiringa te wānanga, the energy that's created around seeking common understanding, around consideration, around deliberation, and around reflection. Anything to add from your end, Jamie?
No, tino pai ngā waka māramatanga, Mitch, I guess, but what it reminds us is that, in order to have constructive and energetic dialogue and reflection, deliberation, debate, and discussion, we've got to bring our best selves. And so that's where, for me, ko hiringa nuku, ko hiringa rangi, it's sort of reminding us that if we're to engage in a dialogue or an exchange with others, and if we're to land on a common understanding through deliberation and debate, reflection, we've got to come to that forum, to that exchange, with the right mindset, both physically and from a conscious sort of standpoint, our wairua, just bringing our best selves to that conversation and that exchange. So that's what I love about this, that pattern. It's a really useful framework when we think about, we as individuals or we as a collective, bringing our holistic selves to a dialogue, exchange, a reflection, and a deliberation.
It's a nice way of putting it, having that sense of responsibility when we do come into these forums to share, to have exchange, that we do come in prepared, that we do come in understanding the kaupapa, that we do come in knowing what it is that we're talking about, that we have a sense of preparation, a sense of readiness to enter into these discussions for meaningful reasons, so that we get a meaningful and a purposeful outcome from this discussion. Ko hiringa tau, our next line, we tend to hear tau quite often, of course, and more often than not, we hear it in terms of being settled. In this context, you could also consider it to form a foundation, or to provide a sense of reassurance that you are ready, that you are prepared to enter into this conversation, to enter into this wānanga, and that you do have everything that you require in order to have meaningful debate, meaningful input into this particular kaupapa that's in front of you. Hiringa, ko hiringa take take, kita pai au, kita o marama. I listened to Jamie and Hemi and Te Poihi on Te Kohu Karewa talk about this a little while ago. So just a little plug for that too, Wānanga, if you want to dig into any of these karakia in more depth, go into Te Korimako Taranaki Facebook page and just searching He Kohu Karewa, you come up with a series of hour-long wānanga that Jamie, Hemi and Tapohi have done that share a lot more in-depth knowledge around these particular karakia, and at times you'll see the longer version of these. But what I liked about that discussion was in terms of the term take take, to be able to provide a platform, and a platform to then prepare yourself to move into this world of light, this world of understanding. So we tend to see this ka puta ki te waiao, ki te ao marama. We see that in a number of karakia, the reference to that particular kōrero. But in terms of the context of this karakia, the way that I see it, the way that I like to explain it, is that it prepares us that we have a good platform to be able to move forward into this kaupapa and move forward in a meaningful way into the world of light. So it's more around the understanding that we come to a shared understanding, that we find a pathway, a common pathway that we agree on. Because we've had the dialogue, we've had the exchange, we've had the conversation, we've had the wānanga, we've considered that the things that are intangible and things that are tangible to us, we've considered the things that may be productive and may be intuitive to this particular kaupapa. And from all of that sense of understanding, we've found a shared pathway to then be able to emerge into this world of light, into this world of understanding that this particular karakia talks about.
And what I love about our karakia, and the wonderful thing is that these are sort of what I describe as foundational narratives, because if you look at this karakia through the lens of the separation story, what you see is that the time of rangi and papa, you basically have sort of papa tuanuku and all of her energy, rangi nui, and then you've got their tamariki in the middle having dialogue, ko herenga te kōrero, ko herenga te wānanga, and of course they debated and they disputed what would happen. Some were in favour, some weren't, and then ko herenga tau, and then they came to a resolution where an agreement was made between the children, and then the separation occurred. Ko herenga take take ki te waiao ki te ao marama, which provided a platform for them to come into the world of light. And so, that's the wonder of karakia, the fact that he te kupu engari he hohonu te kōrero, that although, a small framework like this is able to succinctly describe that separation story. But more importantly, what it reminds us and what it tells us is that separation story is part of that cycle of life and that development that we go through. And, when you think about whether it's at an individual level or with their own whānau or extended whānau or hapu, marae or iwi, we've constantly got that dynamism. I mean, as an individual, right, you've always got those material things that, that cause us to want and desire, and then we've got the other side, which we're trying to get that balance. We've constantly got that dialogue in our own minds around, oh gee, should I do this, should I do that, should I? And then we're sort of trying to resolve in our own minds things that we should do, and we ultimately make decisions, ko herenga tau, and we're hopeful that most of those decisions, it sort of puts us in a better place than we are today. But that whole journey of life, that cycle that Te Whiti and Tohu often talk about, ko te pō te kai hari te rā, ko te mate te kai hari te ora, that transition from darkness to light, or from a state of insecurity to security, or a state of not understanding to understanding. And so that's why this is one of my favorite karakia, because it just has so much application and so much beautiful meaning. because it's relevant to me as an individual, but also, you know, in the context of coming into a space to open a hui or a forum, you know, it just speaks to all of the things we need to come to that space or to a forum with, which of course is always sort of the positive, right intentions, or at least the intention that we want to get to a place, ko hiringa take ki te waiao ki te ao marama, you know, where we create a platform and a forum to get to a place of understanding or an improved state from where we are. So yeah, it just reminded me, thanks Mitch, when you were doing that little he kohu kāre with us, this very much is focused, you know, links back to that whole separation and creation story as well. But it just goes to show it's as relevant then as it is today. But that's the wonderful thing about our Māori narrative, our foundational narratives. They're enduring and enduring, right? So that because the base understanding maramatanga, irrespective of whether it was 1800 or 1600 or whatever, is still relevant.
And like Jamie mentions, we all go through these struggles. We're all human. We all experience difficulties and challenging situations, challenging decisions. But these types of frameworks provide the inspiration that we need in order to find a pathway forward. And in a lovely whakataukitanga kōrero, in terms of what Jamie said, from pareaka ko te pō te kai are o te rā, ko te mate te kai are o te ora. So to be able to really understand light, you need to have experienced dark. In order to really understand life, you need to have experienced the loss of someone. So this particular karakia aims to provide that level of inspiration that we need when we find ourselves within those situations, to be able to find a pathway to puta ki te waiao ki te ao marama, to emerge into the world of light, the world of understanding. So when we think of application, what are ways where we can use this karakia, within which forum, within which situations is this karakia appropriate? So of course, as we've discussed, those times where we need to have debates, those times where we need to create dialogue, when we need to generate a balanced understanding, when we need to have that wānanga in order to find the right pathway forward for us, whether it's us as an individual or whether it's us as a group, and being able to provide that energy and inspiration to a forum, to a group, whether it's a hui, whether it's a wānanga, whether it's an education forum. This is a real versatile karakia for that. And in fact, all of the karakia within the calendar, and again, it's been intentional, are really versatile and can be used in a number of forum. Probably the only two that we tend to say is we don't tend to use these for kai or use these for mate. But fantastic karakia to open a hui, to close a hui, especially once you've agreed and found a way forward, or you found a solution. Well, it's just been a fantastic opportunity to have a really meaningful conversation. So those are opportunities for application.
You can even use this to start your day. You'd start off by mihi te rā, tēnā koe e te rā, or nau mai e te rā. And then you can just say, ko hiringa nuku, ko hiringa rangi, ko hiringa te kōrero, ko hiringa te wānanga, ko hiringa tau, ko hiringa take ki te waiao ki te ao marama. Because if you think about what we want during the day, right, having a well-balanced day, actually, I quite enjoy a bit of dialogue and conversation. The wānanga pieces, we all, most of us sort of hope that during the day we're going to learn something new or be inspired by something new. That it's going to, you can look at hiringa tau as it's going to provide us, again, a sense of stability or security. And then ultimately a platform for us to continue to grow and develop. So that's, and that's beautiful. As I say, iti ngā kupu, but nui ngā kōrero.
There's also, this is also used on the Ngāti Maru settlement, Jamie, is that correct?
Yep, just again, because it was sort of used in a sense to sort of capture where Maru had got to, you know, that whole process of settlement was a process of going through these particular stages and getting to that end point, being able to say that they now have a platform which will provide an opportunity for success, which is ko hiringa take take ki te waiao ki te ao marama. Yeah, so that gives you a sense of, you know, how it can be utilized. You know, you can use this as a mihi, a karakia. It can be used as a tauparapara. You know, you can open up with a mihi, wahine mai or tāne mai, both our wahine and tāne, you open up with this, and then you no reira, you know, taranaki te maunga, ko hurenui te awa, ko Ngāti Mutunga te iwi, so on. But that goes for, as Mitch has said, most of these karakia, we deliberately identified them because, you know, we want your ability to be able to use them in different contexts.
And in terms of the closing of the karakia, what was suggested in the calendar is that you could simply use tūturu whakamaua kia tīna, hui e, tai ki e, or any variation of that. It could be the e rongo e, o te api kirunga. It could be the aumi e, hui e. Those are all different ways that you could close this if you wanted to use this as a karakia. For me, I just like to use that tūturu whakamaua kia tīna, hui e, tai ki e. So in terms of the taki of the karakia, I mean, the taki can be up to the individual, and it might be that there's a particular beat, a particular pattern that you like to use to help you remember. For me, the taki that I tend to use is ko hiringa nuku, ko hiringa rangi, ko hiringa te kōrero, ko hiringa te wānanga, ko hiringa tau, ko hiringa taketake ki te waiao, ki te ao marama, tūturu o te whakamaua kia tīna. So that's the particular taki that I use for this karakia.
Yeah, so the beautiful, I love this karakia. It's beautiful. It's and you know, if you ever wanted to sort of talk about the creation, separation of rangi and papa, here you have it in 6 lines, and then you can sort of embellish, you know, what was going on in between times. But then again, you know, that whole creation story, that separation it sort of talks to us. It's like the birthing. I mean, you know, we come from the night within the womb out to te ao marama, you know, and then we start to engage in kōrero and wānanga, that learning, that development, that provides a bit of a grounding and a platform for us to succeed in life. We had a pātai here from Chris, Nā wai tito. This is part of, this is seen in a number of our longer karakia. And as I said, you know, so a number of older or traditional karakia, and a lot of these shorter references were seen in a number of our poi during the time of parihaka. And a number of those poi, what Tohu and Te Whiti and others drew on was a number of these foundational narratives. And so when you think about, because this verse is also seen in some of our poi manu, and when you sort of think about the context of parihaka, this again is relevant because, you know, our people had been afflicted by raupatu, by muru, and so they were looking for inspiration and energy from, you know, from our whenua, from each other, from those spiritual elements. You know, there was a whole lot of dialogue and discussion happening during that time around the path they should take and what they should do, you know, building group understanding, ko hiringa te wānanga. And that was really the role of the 18th and 19th. You know, the 18th actually provided a forum to have dialogue and discussion and to build understanding and collective action. And then, you know, again, ultimately you have dialogue, you have discussion, you come to a state of wānanga improve your position. And so, yeah, again, context. I guess it's a really good partai there around, could you end with rire hau pai marire? Well, you can actually, because if you look at a lot of our pai marire karakia, you know, you have the transliteration karakia that we've done, which we're mimicking in Māori, some of the commands and of soldiers and those sorts of things. But there are a number of our karakia pai marire that draw upon these foundational sort of traditional narratives that reference the likes of Tāne and similar foundational kōrero is captured in this particular karakia. And so again, you know, whai au ki te ao marama, rire hau pai marire. Because rire hau means to be calm and settled, and pai marire is to be peaceful and settled, right? And so, yeah, that fits as well. Intention is everything. But pai tērā, tino pai tērā pātai.
These are really good sessions because they only a quick 30 minutes. It's just an opportunity for us just to provide a whakamārama, an explanation around the karakia, how it can be applied, and really good to hear Jamie's take on it because it brings it to a more contemporary, more modern, everyday perspective and how we can actually consider these words within our own context. Can we just go to the next slide, Ocean, just to bring up the dates? So just for everyone's information, so we've got our next session on the 12th of October, then the 2nd of November, and our final one on the 14th of December. So again, just another good opportunity for us to go through those karakia for the coming months. So I wonder if we close off with a karakia that we've just gone through today. So if we go back to the last slide, Ocean, we'll use that as our closing karakia. Ka pai, he me ia nora ki a tātou, me ngā kōrero o tepo. Me ngā wānanga ko wānanga ia, ngā kōrero ko kōrero tia. Ngā kōrero ānuku, ngā kōrero ārangi. O reira tēnei kami i atu rā ki a koutou. Ka take atu rā tātou nei kōrero, a tātou nei kōrero o te pō ki te karakia nei. O reira, ko hiringa nuku, ko hiringa rangi, ko hiringa te kōrero, ko hiringa te wānanga, ko hiringa tau, ko hiringa taketake ki te whai au, ki te ao marama, tūturu o uti whakamaua kia tīna, uie, tai hi. Ka pai. Pō Mārie Wānanga, we'll put this up on YouTube as well.
Tēnā koutou, pō Mārie.